For most of human history, there were no kings, no rulers, no emperors, no one person whose word was law. Just groups of people making decisions together. And then, around 5,000 years ago, everything changed. One person started giving orders, and everyone else started obeying them. How that happened is one of the strangest stories in human history. Hunter-gatherer societies were remarkably equal, not perfectly equal, not without conflict or hierarchy, but significantly flatter than anything that came after. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer groups consistently find the same pattern. Leaders exist, but their authority is informal, situational, earned continuously through skill and judgment. A good hunter might lead a hunt. A respected elder might mediate a dispute. But that same person could not command others to work for them, could not claim resources that weren't theirs, could not pass their status automatically to their children, because there was nothing to pass. Status in a hunter-gatherer band was not a possession, it was a reputation. And reputations have to be earned fresh by each person. There is a behavior that researchers call counter-dominance. It shows up in almost every hunter-gatherer society ever studied. When one person tries to accumulate too much power, the group pushes back. They mock them, exclude them, refuse to cooperate with them. In some cases, they remove them entirely. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying this. He found that hunter-gatherer groups actively suppress attempts at dominance, not because they had laws against it, but because everyone understood instinctively that one person accumulating too much power was dangerous for everyone else. The group enforced equality not through ideology, through constant, collective, low-level resistance to anyone who got too big. For hundreds of thousands of years, this system held. Then farming broke it. When humans started farming, land became everything. Not just important, everything. The difference between fertile land and poor land was the difference between surviving winter and not. And fertile land is not evenly distributed. Some people ended up with better land than others. Better land meant more food. More food meant more people. More people meant more labor. More labor meant more land could be farmed. Wealth started compounding. For the first time in human history, some families became dramatically richer than their neighbors. And wealth, it turned out, could do something reputation alone could not. It could be inherited. A powerful hunter's reputation died with them. But a wealthy farmer's land passed to their children, and their children's children. And suddenly status was no longer something you earned. It was something you were born into. But wealth alone does not make a king. Plenty of rich people have existed without becoming rulers. What turned wealth into power was a specific problem that farming created: coordination. Hunter-gatherer groups were small. 30 to 50 people making decisions together worked fine. But farming villages grew. Then towns, then cities. A city of 10,000 people cannot make decisions the way a band of 50 does. Someone has to organize the irrigation system, decide where the walls go, coordinate the harvest, manage disputes between people who don't know each other. The complexity of agricultural society created a genuine need for centralized decision-making. And the person who already had the most resources was the obvious candidate to fill that role. Not because they were necessarily the best qualified, but because they could afford to. Managing a city doesn't generate food directly. You need someone else's surplus to fund it. The wealthy family could do that. The average farmer could not. Leadership and wealth merged, not by design, by circumstance. The next step was making it permanent. And this required something subtle but crucial: a story. Raw power can hold a population in line for a while. but it is exhausting and expensive. You need soldiers everywhere, constant enforcement, constant suppression of resistance. A much more efficient system is one where the population genuinely believes in the ruler's right to rule, where obedience is not extracted by force but given voluntarily, because it seems natural, inevitable, ordained. Every early kingship in history solved this problem the same way. They connected the king to the divine. In Mesopotamia, the king was the representative of the gods on earth. In Egypt, the pharaoh was not just appointed by the gods, he was a god. In China, rulers governed under what was called the mandate of heaven. Divine permission to rule, revocable only if they ruled badly, which conveniently meant that successful rulers always had the mandate, and failed rulers in retrospect had clearly lost it. The theology was flexible in exactly the right direction. This was not cynical manipulation by calculating rulers, or not entirely. It was also genuinely believed. By the rulers themselves, by the priests who legitimized them, by the populations who accepted it, because the story made sense within the worldview available at the time. If everything happens because the gods will it, then the person who rose to power did so because the gods permitted it. The king's existence was its own proof of divine favor. Circular logic, but logic that held an empire together for centuries. There is a final piece that cemented kingship as a permanent institution. Armies. Once you have surplus wealth and centralized authority, you can do something no hunter-gatherer group ever could. You can pay people to fight for you full-time. Professional soldiers, not farmers who pick up spears in emergencies. People whose entire job is organized violence. This changed the power equation permanently. A king with a professional army could suppress the counter-dominance behavior that had kept individuals in check for hundreds of thousands of years. The group could no longer simply push back against someone who accumulated too much power, because the person with too much power now had people whose job was to stop them from being pushed back. The ancient mechanism that kept human societies flat for most of prehistory was overwhelmed, not by ideology, not by consent, by organized force funded by agricultural surplus. In the span of a few thousand years, humans went from societies where no one person could accumulate lasting power to societies where one family could rule millions. Not because human nature changed. Human nature did not change. What changed was the environment. Farming created surplus. Surplus created wealth. Wealth created inequality. Inequality created the need for coordination. Coordination created centralized authority. Centralized authority attracted divine legitimacy. Divine legitimacy attracted military power. Military power made it permanent. Each step followed from the last. Not planned, not designed. Emergent. The product of thousands of individual decisions, each locally rational, adding up to something none of the individuals could have predicted or intended. Kings were not invented by ambitious men who wanted power. They were invented by a set of conditions that made power possible for the first time. And once power was possible, someone was always going to reach for it. Basically, humans did not invent kings. They invented farming, and kings were what came next.